When it comes to the MCU, rumors never stop in regards to where is it going from here? What will they do next? How will they bounce back from this movie or TV show? How will they recapture their former glory? And I don't know the answer to that. I can't see the future, nor am I a part of Marvel itself. But I can see some of the things Marvel has done in the past that they have not fully explored yet. And some things that they haven't tried that I think would be amazing to see. So today, I want to talk about 7 twists that I would put in to Avengers Kang Dynasty if I were in charge of making that film. So the first thing I would do is I would have Kang destroy the Council of Kang. So at the end of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, in an end credit scene, we see all the Kangs from across the multiverse all come together in this Coliseum. They're to talk about this growing threat. The thing is, Marvel hasn't exactly established Kang as a huge threat to this point. We have seen him in Loki, where he was kind of a He Who Remains character, and he just got stabbed and he was done. We saw him in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, but he didn't have the power of time on his side, which is like his big thing, and he was kicked into the collapsing device and he was finished by Ant-Man. The fact that he was beaten so easily by 2 characters on their own, with some help from partners, but essentially just a few characters defeated Kang twice, he hasn't seemed like this huge Avengers level threat. And I think that's the first thing that needs to change. We need to see a Kang who establishes his dominance right from the get-go. So I would open with the Council of Kang. These Kangs have grouped together, have gathered to discuss this threat. And then the leader Kangs, the ones who gathered the group, realize somebody's missing. One Kang failed to show up. They get that Kang on some sort of a device, on some sort of a call, and see where they are, and he tells them that, essentially, he feels like the biggest threat to his reign is not the Avengers, is not this coming source of time travel power that others are gaining, but his greatest threat is them. And that he explored the multiverse looking for a weapon of his own that he could use, and at the end of time, he made an ally that gives him what he needs. And at that, he would sick Alioth, the giant matter-consuming monster at the end of time from Loki, on the Council of Kang. And this one Kang would defeat all the other ones, showing that he is the most powerful threat. And that without even being there, he sets things up to take out all his other threats, leaving this one Kang left as the big, worst Kang that the Avengers need to face. So with all the other Kangs out of the way, we now have this ultimate Kang that has established himself as the biggest, baddest Kang out there and is now ready to conquer a timeline, to conquer a universe. And that leads to point number 2, that our universe, the MCU universe we have been following, is the perfect universe for him to conquer because it no longer contains Infinity Stones. The Avengers defeated Thanos, but they did so after Thanos destroyed the Infinity Stones of their timeline. So to beat him, they went to other timelines and gathered Infinity Stones to bring everyone back, and then in a final battle, they took out Thanos and his forces. But then they returned those stones to the other timelines. The result being, the timeline they are in no longer has these great sources of power that could compete against Kang. This is essentially a power vacuum in the universe. And it leaves it ripe for Kang to come in and decide this is the one he wants to face. With so many power sources now either gone or defeated, it just leaves the universe open to a new conqueror to come in. And that is where Kang will make his move. And that leads to point number 3, that Kang will use his manipulation and power of time to essentially be unstoppable. Now, we have seen Kang multiple times, but he never really uses time as a weapon in those scenarios. In Loki, he runs the timeline, but he doesn't use it against the Lokis. He lets them choose whether to defeat him, and he just sits there. In Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, we see him again, but at this point, he's in the quantum realm where he doesn't have his time manipulation powers available to him. He's trying to get back into the timeline so he can get the power of time and get back to his full strength, but he never gets there. This Kang, though, will. He will have time on his side. He'll have his full array of weapons. He'll have everything that makes him as powerful and as scary as he possibly could be. We have seen time used many times before in the MCU. Doctor Strange has used it multiple times. He defeated Dormammu by setting this time loop that Dormammu, this incredibly powerful being, could not get out of. He went into a whole bunch of futures, trying to see all the possible outcomes. They only beat Thanos to Doctor Strange's satisfaction in one of those scenarios, but because Doctor Strange was able to go forward in time to see all those options, it allowed him to choose the outcome he wanted. Well, now that power resides with Kang. Doctor Strange no longer has the time stone. He doesn't have that ability anymore. But Kang can still manipulate time. He can set time loops that the Avengers can't get out of. He can look to the future to figure out which one defeats the Avengers, and he's done. All these incredible abilities we've seen the Avengers be able to use with time is now in the hands of Kang. And the Avengers won't be able to compete with this, except that they have a time machine of their own. And this leads to point number 4, that Kang would very quickly destroy the Avengers time machine and take time travel away from them. So with Kang showing up, being able to manipulate the timeline in so many different ways, the Avengers are quickly going to realize the only way to defeat him is to fight fire with fire. And they do that by accessing their own time machine once more. They strive to go into another timeline to find some weapon that they could fight Kang with. But Kang is a master of time. He sees this coming. And when they go back in time to try and find a way to beat him, he's there waiting for them. He forces them back to their own timeline and destroys the one weapon they had left. And now the Avengers are stuck. Their time machine is gone. Tony Stark is gone. He can't help them rebuild it. The Infinity Stones no longer exist. So many sources of power that they could potentially try and wield against Kang is no longer an option to them. And time is entirely on the side of Kang. And this is where Kang puts the nail in the coffin and sets things up to establish his dynasty once and for all. And that leads to point number 5. I would have Kang go through the multiverse and bring together a group of lieutenants to rule under him across this universe. We have seen the greatest heroes come together on multiple occasions to defeat some big bad. But what we have not yet seen is a gathering of the greatest villains of the MCU to essentially establish like an anti-Avengers, a group of people that are so powerful, so unbeatable, that it seems so overwhelming for the Avengers that they just can't face such a large threat all at once. Now, we can talk about which villains that Kang would choose to be under him, but to me, it would be people who have wanted power, who have sought out some way of ruling on their own, and yet have been thwarted. Kang wants to rule everything, not just the world, not just one area. He wants to rule it all, but that's a lot. And so bringing forward these lieutenants that he could give control over certain areas, that they can rule in his stead and report back to him. This would give him exactly what he wants, full power. And yet he doesn't have to do all the work because he has his lieutenants to do it for him. So some of the villains that I have seen in the past that have been so amazing that I would love to see brought back, Thanos. Why not bring him back for another movie? This time, he is underneath Kang. This big threat that the Avengers had to fight so hard and barely were able to beat is now a lieutenant underneath Kang. Talk about establishing a power source that the Avengers are having trouble with. He puts Thanos in charge of one section. He establishes Hela as another one. Hela was crazy powerful in Thor Ragnarok. Imagine if she was at full power over an area of her own. We could have Ultron come back. Ultron, I feel like, was a little underutilized even in his own movie. He was powerful. He was able to control an army, but the comic book Ultron, he established such an unbeatable force that imagine if we had that full-scale Ultron that managed to get the power and managed to hold this area. Essentially an Age of Ultron area that he can control. And the last one I would like to see him bring back would be Killmonger. Now, he might seem like a step down from the other threats, from Hela, from Thanos, from Ultron, but he's really not. They had so much power backing them up. He did not. But he was a brilliant strategist. And he really wanted the power to make the world what he wanted it to be. I feel like he is an he's a villain that could come back and really show how he would change things if he was in control. So it might be that Kang would not see all these different villains and decide to go with this human from Earth. But on the flip side, he might. He is a traveler from the multiverse. He may look at some other timelines and see areas where Killmonger did take over and establish his rule, and he might decide, yeah, I'm going to bring him back as my fourth lieutenant. And with this group of unbeatable, amazing villains, Kang would have his way of ruling and establishing his power that the Avengers cannot compete with. And I think Kang would not be satisfied there. He has his lieutenants, but the Avengers could still be a threat. They could find a way to defeat these villains. So that brings me to point number 6. I would have Kang use his ability of manipulating time to stop the Avengers once and for all. I would have him depower them and wipe their memories and make it so that they can't even remember who they were before this. They might still be around, they might still be walking about, but their power is gone, their memory is gone, so they don't even know that they're the ones who should be fighting this threat. In the comics at one point, Kang has this weapon that can depower people. But in this movie, I would have him use time. Maybe he would have 2 timelines crash into each other and merge parts from each of the timelines. Find some way to manipulate this timeline so that he can create heroes, the Avengers, that don't have their abilities, that aren't remembering any world other than the one that Kang has established. And with the Avengers, not even knowing they're the Avengers, they won't rise up. They won't be the threat who can defeat Kang. And this brings me to my final point, number 7. I would have Kang win. In the end of this, I would have Kang establish his dynasty, establish his rule over this universe. He has his lieutenants. He has no threat to his power. And that's where I'd end the movie. We have Avengers Secret Wars coming shortly after Avengers Kang Dynasty. We're expecting 2 Marvel movies to come up between then. And I'll talk about that some other time, some other movie, but for this film, I would have it end there. End where it seems like there's absolutely no hope. End with Kang establishing Kang's dynasty. So those are the 7 twists I would have appear in this movie. Stay tuned, as in a future video, I'm going to talk about the 7 twists I would put in Avengers Secret Wars that essentially would have them able to overcome this seemingly unbeatable situation. But for now, that's what I have for you. That is how I would establish Avengers Kang Dynasty. What do you think? Do you think that sounds like a movie you would be interested in seeing? An Avengers movie with high enough stakes, with some surprises to it, that you would get re-excited about the MCU? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you have any other ideas on things you would add, I'd love to hear them. And as always, thank you for watching.